The first thing I noticed wasn't the letters, it was the smell of his cologne in my aunt's closet. It stopped me mid-step, like a hand pressed flat against my chest. Cedar and lavender hung in the air, mixed with something sharper I recognized instantly. My husband's cologne. The one I bought him 2 Christmases ago because he said it made him feel put together, even when life felt anything but. I stood there, one shoe still on, the other forgotten somewhere behind me, staring into a closet that had never belonged to him. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Outside, the lake lapped softly against the dock, the sound steady and patient, like it had all the time in the world. Inside, my heart thudded hard enough that I wondered if the walls could hear it. I told myself it was a coincidence. I told myself scent travels, that I was tired, that grief can make your mind reach for familiar things. Then I saw the shirts, folded neatly on the second shelf, pressed in a way my aunt never did. Button-downs in colors I recognized because I'd ironed them myself. A navy sweater with a loose thread at the cuff that I'd meant to fix months ago. A pair of dress shoes tucked carefully into a cloth bag. My knees went weak. I didn't cry. Not then. I reached out and touched the sweater, half expecting it to vanish under my fingers. It didn't. It was real. Warm, even, like it remembered being worn. And in that moment, standing alone in my aunt's lakeside house, the house she'd left to me in a will I hadn't expected, I understood that inheritance can be a kind of trap. Sometimes, what you're given isn't a gift. It's a door. Before all of this, my life felt ordinary in the way people often mistake for safe. I'd been married to Daniel for 11 years. We had routines instead of sparks, comfort instead of fireworks. We argued about money in low voices and fell asleep to the television most nights. There was no grand betrayal I could point to, no obvious fracture I'd ignored. Or so I thought. My Aunt Margaret, Aunt Maggie to me, had always been my anchor. She lived alone by the lake, taught high school literature for decades, and believed fiercely in independence. She was the one who taught me to drive a stick shift, who mailed handwritten notes long after everyone else switched to texts. When my mother died, it was Aunt Maggie who showed up with soup and stayed for a week without asking. She never married. She said she'd had enough love to last a lifetime, and when I asked what that meant, she'd just smile and change the subject. Her death came suddenly. An aneurysm, the doctor said. No warning. One phone call that split my life cleanly into before and after. The house came to me because, as her lawyer put it, she wanted it to stay in the family, but specifically with you. Daniel hugged me when I told him. Long, tight. She must have loved you a lot, he said. I thought so too. I went to the lake house alone at first. Daniel said he couldn't get time off work right away, that he'd come up the following weekend. I didn't push. Grief has its own gravity, and I wanted to feel it without explaining myself. The house smelled like old books and lemon polish. Everything was exactly where she'd left it, her mug by the sink, a bookmark halfway through a novel on the nightstand. I moved through the room slowly, touching things like they might still be warm. It was in the bedroom closet where everything changed. After the initial shock, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands shook as I tried to breathe through the nausea rolling up my throat. There had to be an explanation. Daniel traveled for work. He stayed with friends sometimes. Maybe he'd left things here years ago and forgotten. Maybe Aunt Maggie had let him store clothes during a renovation. Maybe. But the closet was organized with care. Intentional. Lived in. And my aunt wasn't the kind of woman who borrowed men's clothes. I didn't confront him right away. I stayed the night in that house, lying awake in my aunt's bed, listening to the lake and thinking about every time Daniel had said he was working late. Every weekend conference. Every trip he'd insisted I didn't need to join. Memory rearranges itself when the truth enters the room. The next morning, I found the letters. They were tucked into a shoebox beneath the bed, tied with twine. I sat on the floor and opened them with hands that no longer felt like mine. They weren't explicit. That almost made them worse. They were tender, familiar, intimate in the way only long habits can be. I miss your laugh in the mornings. Being here with you feels like breathing. We have to be careful, but I wouldn't trade this. Some were signed with initials. Others weren't signed at all, like the writer knew exactly who would read them. One letter mentioned me. She trusts me. That makes this harder. I pressed my fist into my mouth to keep from making a sound. This wasn't a moment. This wasn't a mistake. This was a life running parallel to mine. When Daniel arrived 2 days later, I was waiting at the kitchen table. The letters were stacked neatly in front of me. His sweater lay folded beside them. He stopped short when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" he asked. I slid the sweater toward him. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked up slowly, like a man bracing for impact. "You want to explain why your clothes are in my aunt's closet?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything. Finally, he exhaled and said, "It wasn't supposed to come out like this." I laughed once. A short, broken sound. "How is it supposed to come out, Daniel?" He sat down heavily, rubbing his hands together. "It just happened." "No," I said quietly. "It unfolded." He flinched at that. "She was lonely," he said. "We both were." I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the life I thought I knew. "How long?" He hesitated. "How long?" I repeated. 5 years, he whispered. 5 years. Longer than the sweater had needed fixing. Longer than I'd realized how tired I was. I stood up then, not in anger, but in something colder, clearer. "My aunt left me this house," I said. "Did she know?" His eyes filled with something like regret. "She loved you," he said. That wasn't an answer. And in that moment, surrounded by the evidence of a secret I hadn't consented to, I realized grief wasn't the heaviest thing in that room. Betrayal was. Daniel sat there like the air had thickened around him. His eyes kept drifting toward the letters as if they were alive, like they might crawl across the table and bite him. I watched his hands. They were clasped so tightly the knuckles had gone pale, the way they did when he was trying to control a situation he no longer owned. Outside, the lake was doing what it always did, moving gently, pretending nothing had changed. Inside, my whole life was shifting. 5 years, I repeated, not because I didn't hear him, but because my mind needed to touch the number again. "You're telling me you came here for 5 years, and I never knew." He swallowed. "It wasn't." "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't start with 'it wasn't.'" My voice sounded calmer than I felt. That frightened me a little. Calm doesn't mean peace. Sometimes calm is what happens right before something breaks cleanly in two. Daniel's gaze lifted to mine. "Margaret and it wasn't about you." I stared at him. "Everything about this is about me. I'm your wife." He winced at that word, wife, like it had weight he'd forgotten. He glanced down at the table and started picking at a corner of one envelope, the way a child worries paper when they're nervous. "We didn't plan it," he said. "It started with talking." She was easy to talk to. I let out a breath that came out sharp. "Because she listened?" He nodded, like that was the whole explanation. I looked past him, out the window, at the pale strip of water and the dock my aunt used to sit on with her tea. My throat tightened. I could almost see her there, legs crossed, cardigan wrapped around her, face tilted toward the sun like she was absorbing whatever warmth she could. "My aunt wasn't a lonely hobby," I said slowly. "She was a person." "I know," he whispered. "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you just know how to say that now that you're caught?" He flinched again. "I never wanted to hurt you." I leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "Then why are your clothes in her closet, Daniel? Why are there letters under the bed? Why does this house smell like you?" He went still. And for the first time, I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of being seen. "I stayed here," he admitted quietly. "A lot." The words landed like a cold stone in my stomach. "How often?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. The pause was long enough for me to imagine it. Weekends. Nights. Holidays. Moments I thought belonged to our marriage that were being shared somewhere else with someone who once held my hand at my mother's funeral. Finally, he said, "Sometimes when you thought I was on work trips." I was here. I stared at him so hard my eyes burned. My mind started flipping through years of memories like pages in a book that had suddenly been rewritten. That conference in Chicago. The emergency meeting on our anniversary. The weekend he said he couldn't come to my cousin's baby shower because of deadlines. The times he came home smelling like fresh air and said he'd just been driving to clear his head. He hadn't been clearing his head. He'd been living another life. I felt my body go strangely light, like my bones had turned to paper. Did she know you were married? I asked, already hating myself for how desperate that question sounded. His eyes flickered. Of course she knew. The air left my lungs. Then she knew she was doing this to me. He shook his head quickly. She didn't see it like that. I laughed, this time without humor. Oh, I'm sure she didn't. People rarely see themselves as villains in their own story. Daniel looked down again. She said you were happy, that you were busy with your own life, that you didn't need me the way she did. My jaw tightened. So you let her write my feelings for me? He didn't respond. In that silence, a new thought slid into place, quiet, sharp, unavoidable. The house. The inheritance. My aunt's lawyer had said she wanted the house to go to me specifically. That detail had seemed loving before. Now it felt like a question. I asked it carefully, like touching a bruised spot. Did she leave me the house because she loved me, I said, or because she knew you and I would end up here, together, with this? Daniel's face changed. Not anger. Not denial. Something smaller. Guilt. And I understood the truth before he spoke. She knew, I whispered. He closed his eyes. She said she couldn't keep living like that, he admitted. Near the end, she wanted to stop. She wanted you to have it. She said it was the only way she could make something right. Make something right. As if a deed could fix what 5 years had done. As if handing me a house could replace the part of me they'd taken without permission. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet kitchen. I need air, I said. Daniel rose too. Please, don't follow me, I said, and the firmness in my voice surprised us both. I stepped outside onto the porch. The wind off the lake was cold and clean. It filled my lungs, but it didn't wash anything away. I walked down the steps and onto the grass, my shoes sinking slightly into damp earth. I wrapped my arms around myself and stared out at the water. My aunt used to say the lake could hold your secrets, but it never kept them forever. Sooner or later, whatever you dropped into it would float back up. I thought about the last time I saw her alive. She'd hugged me tightly at Christmas, her cheek pressed against mine. You've grown into such a strong woman, she'd said softly. I remembered the way she'd paused, like she wanted to say something else. Then she smiled and handed me a tin of cookies as if sugar could cover a hard truth. Had she been looking at me with guilt in that moment? With longing? With regret? Or had she already decided I would inherit not just her home, but the aftermath of her choices? Behind me, the porch door creaked. Daniel stepped out anyway, stopping a few feet away like he knew he didn't have the right to come closer. I'm sorry, he said again. I didn't turn around. You keep saying that, I replied, my voice quiet. But you're still standing in my aunt's house like it belongs to you. It doesn't, he said quickly. No, I said. It belongs to my aunt. And now it belongs to me. And all I can think is how many times you stood in this exact spot, looking at this lake, while I was at home believing in you. I heard him inhale, shaky. I didn't mean for it to go on so long. That's the thing about betrayal, I said. It never means to. It just keeps choosing itself over and over until it becomes a lifestyle. Daniel was silent. I finally turned and looked at him. His face was pale. His eyes were wet. He looked like a man who expected my anger to absolve him, as if punishment would be easier than being fully seen. But I didn't give him anger. I gave him the truth. I'm going to find out everything, I said. Not just what you're ready to confess. Everything. His mouth opened slightly. What does that mean? It means, I replied, that this house is going to tell me the parts you both hid. And I'm going to listen. I walked past him, back inside, my hands steadier than my heart. Because the next step wasn't about confrontation anymore. It was about investigation. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the grief and nausea and disbelief, a new feeling was forming, quiet, determined. If the inheritance was a door, I was going to walk through it with my eyes open. I slept poorly that night. Not because Daniel was there, he wasn't. I told him to leave, and to his credit, he did without arguing. He packed a small bag, eyes down, movements careful, like someone afraid to disturb a crime scene. I stayed. I stayed because the house felt like it was holding its breath, and I needed to hear what it had been trying to say all along. The bed creaked when I turned over, the sound sharp in the dark. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as the moonlight slid across the room. Every now and then, the lake made a soft, hollow sound against the dock, like a slow exhale. At some point, grief gave way to something more practical. I got up. I wrapped myself in a sweater, one of mine, and moved through the house with deliberate care, like a librarian reshelving a life. I started where the truth had first found me, the bedroom. I pulled everything out of the closet. Not just Daniel's clothes, everything. Dresses, shoes, boxes. I lined them up on the bed, on the floor, on chairs. Patterns began to appear when I let myself look. There were men's shoes in 3 sizes. Daniel's size. All of them. Polished. Worn. Lived in. There were toiletries in the bathroom that weren't hers. Razor refills I recognized because I'd bought the same brand for years. A half-used bottle of his shampoo tucked behind hers, hidden but not discarded. In the nightstand drawer, beneath a stack of old receipts, I found a small notebook. It wasn't a diary. It was a planner. Dates circled. Initials. Notes written in a tidy, slanted hand I'd seen on countless birthday cards. D here, Friday to Sunday. D late, dinner missed. D back before she asks. She meant me. I sat on the floor with the notebook open in my lap and felt the room tilt. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was logistical. Scheduled. Repeated with intention. This hadn't happened to me. It had been built around me. By morning, I had a system. I brewed coffee I didn't want and spread everything across the dining table. Letters, notebooks, spare keys, yes, spare keys, hidden in a ceramic jar by the door. His handwriting again. Receipts from nearby towns dated during work trips. A photo tucked into a book, Daniel and my aunt on the dock, arms not quite touching, but close enough to tell the truth without saying it. I took photos of everything. Not in a frenzy. Not with shaking hands. With care. Each click felt like reclaiming a piece of my own story. When Daniel texted, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. I wasn't ready for explanations. I was ready for facts. The lawyer came next. Not my aunt's lawyer. A new one. A woman with a steady voice and eyes that didn't flinch when I laid everything out in neat stacks on her desk. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands and said, "You understand that this affects more than your marriage." I nodded. "I do now." She explained what I already suspected. Shared assets, possible financial overlap, the implications of my aunt's intent in leaving me the house. Nothing illegal, yet, but plenty that needed clarity. "Do you believe your aunt intended the house as compensation?" she asked gently. I thought about it. About the guilt in Daniel's eyes. About my aunt's last hug. "I think," I said slowly, "she intended it as a confession she couldn't speak." The lawyer nodded. "Then your next steps matter." I went back to the lake house that afternoon alone. I sat on the dock where my aunt used to read, my feet dangling over the water. The sun was bright, the air cool. For a moment, I let myself remember her as she was before all of this. Sharp, funny, fiercely private. I spoke out loud, my voice carried by the water. "Why didn't you tell me?" The lake didn't answer. But something in me did. Because sometimes people don't confess to be forgiven. They confess to be relieved. And the cost of that relief had landed squarely on me. Daniel called again that evening. I answered this time. "I know you're angry," he said, voice tight. "I'm not," I replied. "I'm informed." There was a pause. "Is that worse?" "For you," I said. "Yes," he sighed. "What do you want?" The question was almost laughable. After years of secrecy, he wanted direction. "I want the truth," I said. "All of it. No soft edges. No protecting her. No protecting yourself." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She loved you." I closed my eyes. "That's not an answer." "She did," he insisted. "She hated herself for it. She tried to end things more than once. And yet," I said, "she kept your clothes in her closet." He didn't argue that. "Tomorrow," I continued, "you're going to write down everything. Dates. Money. Trips. What you told me. What you told her. His breath hitched. Why? Because I'm done guessing, I said. And because the truth doesn't belong to you anymore. That night, I packed my own bag. Not to leave the house, but to leave the marriage. I didn't know what divorce would look like yet. I didn't know how long it would take, or how much it would cost, or how much it would hurt. But I knew this. I could not heal in a space where I was constantly being rewritten by other people's secrets. I placed the house keys on the table beside my aunt's letters and turned off the lights. The lake was still there. The house was still standing. And for the first time since her death, I felt something solid under my feet. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Agency. Because uncovering the betrayal was only the beginning. The consequences were just starting to ripple outward. The first consequence didn't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly in the form of bank statements. Daniel emailed them the next morning, just as I asked. PDFs neatly labeled. Too neat. Like he'd already practiced organizing a life I wasn't meant to see. I sat at the kitchen table in the lake house, my aunt's old placemats still laid out beneath my laptop. The smell of coffee hung in the air, but I didn't drink it. My hands were steady as I opened the files, but something inside me braced, like a muscle that knows pain is coming. At first, the numbers looked ordinary. Mortgage payments, utilities, groceries. Then I saw it. A recurring transfer. Monthly. Same amount. Same day. Sent to an account I didn't recognize. I scrolled. Back and back. Years. 5 years. The same 5 years he'd admitted to. My chest tightened, but I kept going. I cross-checked the account number with the planner I'd found in my aunt's nightstand. It matched. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt something colder move in, clarity, edged with resolve. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He'd funded the betrayal with money we earned together. When I called him, my voice surprised us both. Do you want to explain the transfers? I asked. There was a pause long enough to hear him breathe. They weren't, he started. Don't, I said. I know exactly what they are. Silence again. Finally, he said, she needed help. I let that sit. Did she ask you? I replied slowly, or did you offer? He didn't answer. I want you to listen to me carefully, I continued. That money wasn't yours to give. And it wasn't hers to take. She didn't see it that way, he said quietly. No, I replied. She saw it as owed. That was when the shape of it became unmistakable. This wasn't just an affair. It was a partnership built in the shadows, shared time, shared money, shared lies. And I had been the unknowing sponsor. I hung up without saying goodbye. The public consequences didn't begin with Daniel. They began with the family. My mother's sister had been well loved, respected. The eccentric aunt with the lake house and the quiet wisdom. People spoke of her fondly at church, at the grocery store, at the memorial service I'd barely survived. I dreaded undoing that image. But truth doesn't ask permission. I started with my cousin, Margaret's goddaughter. I showed her the letters. Not all of them. Just enough. She cried quietly, covering her mouth with her hand. I never knew, she whispered. I know, I said. Neither did I. Word travels faster than intention ever does. By the end of the week, people were asking careful questions. Statements softened. Praise grew conditional. No one defended Daniel outright. Some tried to defend Margaret. She was lonely. She was older. She didn't mean harm. I didn't argue. Loneliness explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. Daniel came to the lake house one last time. I met him at the door. He looked smaller somehow, like a man whose reflection had finally caught up with him. I'm moving out, he said. I found a short-term place. I nodded. Good. He hesitated. What are you going to do about the house? I held his gaze. Live in it. He swallowed. After everything? Especially after everything, I said. The house wasn't poisoned. The lies were. And I refused to surrender something my aunt had legally and intentionally given me just because the truth was uncomfortable. I loved you, he said suddenly. I believed him. That was the tragedy of it. I know, I replied. But you loved yourself more. He didn't deny it. The divorce was not dramatic. No shouting in courtrooms. No dramatic confessions. Just paperwork, signatures, and the slow dismantling of a life that had been built on half-truths. The lawyer called it straightforward. I called it surreal. What wasn't straightforward was the grief. I mourned my aunt twice, once for her death and once for who she turned out to be. I mourned my marriage not because it had been perfect, but because I had believed in it. I mourned myself, the version of me who trusted without checking, who assumed love meant safety. But something else happened too. Something quieter. I started waking up early at the lake house, sitting on the porch with my coffee, watching mist lift off the water. I repaired the dock. I planted flowers Margaret never had the patience for. I made the space mine. One afternoon, as I boxed up the last of Daniel's belongings to mail to his new address, I found a note tucked into the lining of one jacket. It was short, written in my aunt's hand. I am sorry for the damage I caused. I hope this house becomes a place of truth for you, even if it never was for us. I sat on the floor and cried then, not because the note absolved anything, but because it finally told the truth. Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from people who loved you, just not enough to stop. And inheritance, I learned, isn't always about property. Sometimes it's about responsibility, about deciding what you will carry forward and what you will end with yourself. I sealed the box, taped it shut, and wrote Daniel's address carefully. When I stood up, the house felt lighter. Not healed, but honest. The lake froze over that winter. It happened slowly, almost politely, thin sheets of ice forming at the edges first, then creeping inward night by night until the water was sealed under a pale, glassy skin. I watched it from the kitchen window one morning, my breath fogging the glass, and thought about how fitting it felt. Everything in my life had hardened into clarity. The divorce papers arrived a week later. I signed them at the same table where I'd sorted through letters and bank statements months earlier. There was no dramatic pause, no trembling pen. Just a quiet understanding that this chapter was closing because it had already ended long before I found the proof. Daniel didn't contest anything. The lawyer told me that sometimes guilt looks like cooperation. I didn't argue. What surprised me most wasn't the legal process. It was how people reacted once the truth became unavoidable. Some neighbors from my hometown stopped calling. Others started bringing casseroles like I'd lost something more respectable than a marriage built on lies. A few friends, people I'd known for years, admitted they'd sensed something was off, but hadn't wanted to interfere. I didn't think it was my place, one of them said softly over coffee. I smiled politely. It's strange how many people believe silence is neutral. I stayed at the lake house through the winter. I fixed the leaky faucet, replaced the warped floorboard near the back door. I learned which windows whistled when the wind came from the north and which corners stayed warmest at night. The house stopped feeling like evidence. It started feeling like shelter. One afternoon, while cleaning out a hall closet I'd avoided, I found a box labeled teaching in my aunt's handwriting. Inside were graded essays, lesson plans, notes from former students. At the bottom was an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a single page. I know I've complicated your grief, she wrote. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you will live here freely, without lies, without apologies. I wasn't brave enough to do that myself. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. For the first time, I felt anger give way to something less consuming. Understanding. Not acceptance, but understanding. Spring came quietly. The ice cracked and retreated, leaving the lake darker, deeper, alive again. I planted herbs along the back walkway. I painted the bedroom walls a color my aunt would have called too cheerful. It felt necessary. Daniel tried once more to speak with me. He asked if we could meet neutral ground, he said. Closure. I thought about it for a day. Then I declined. Some conversations don't bring clarity. They just reopen doors you've already closed. The public consequences settled into place like dust. My aunt's reputation shifted, not ruined, but corrected. People stopped telling stories that painted her as saintly. They spoke more honestly, with pauses, with discomfort. I let that happen. Truth doesn't need protection. It needs space. Daniel moved on, as people do. New apartment. New routines. Eventually, someone knew, I was told. The information reached me secondhand and landed without pain. That surprised me. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always leave you bitter. Sometimes it leaves you precise. One evening, months later, I invited my cousin, the goddaughter, over for dinner. We ate on the porch as the sun dipped low, the lake reflecting copper and gold. "She loved you," my cousin said quietly, gesturing toward the house. "I know," I replied. "She just loved herself too." My cousin nodded. "Do you regret taking the house?" I looked out at the water. Thought about the nights I'd cried here, the mornings I'd woken steady, the version of myself I was becoming. "No," I said. "I regret not knowing sooner. But not this." Healing didn't come as a single moment. It came as habits, as mornings without dread, evenings without suspicion, laughter that wasn't forced. I started writing again, not letters, not confessions, just observations. The way the lake changed color with the sky, the sound of geese overhead, the comfort of knowing where I stood. I learned that trust isn't blind, it's attentive. One night, standing at the edge of the dock, I realized something that finally brought me peace. My aunt and my husband hadn't taken my life from me. They'd only borrowed parts of it without asking. And I had taken them back, piece by piece, with truth, with patience, with boundaries. The inheritance had begun as a nightmare, but it ended as a reckoning. A chance to choose myself, not loudly, not cruelly, but completely. Because the greatest consequence of betrayal isn't loss, it's awakening. And once you're awake, you don't go back to sleep for anyone. By the second summer, the lake felt like it belonged to me. Not in the legal sense. I'd had that since the day the will was read, but in the way a place slowly accepts you once you stop asking permission to exist inside it. I knew the sound the water made just before rain. I knew which steps on the dock needed tightening and which birds returned at the same hour every evening. The house no longer felt like something I'd inherited. It felt like something I'd survived. Friends began visiting. Carefully at first, like they weren't sure what version of me they'd find. Some brought wine. Others brought stories of their own quiet suspicions, their own almost discoveries. I listened more than I spoke. There's a strange intimacy that forms when people realize you've walked through fire and come back standing. They lower their voices. They choose their words more carefully. One afternoon, a woman I barely knew sat across from me on the porch and said, "I think my husband might be cheating." She didn't ask for advice. She asked for courage. I didn't give her answers. I gave her what I had learned. "Pay attention to what your body already knows," I said. "And don't rush yourself into silence." She nodded, tears in her eyes. I watched her drive away and felt the quiet weight of that moment. Betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't closed me. It had sharpened me. Daniel's name came up less and less. When it did, it felt distant, like a story I once read and no longer remembered the details of. That surprised me most of all. I had thought anger would linger, but anger requires energy, and I had better places to put mine. Late one evening, while reorganizing the study, I found a photo tucked into a book I'd already checked once. My aunt and I, years ago, standing on this very dock. She had her arm around my shoulders, her face tilted toward mine. On the back, she'd written, "You always deserve the truth." I sat with that for a long time. I didn't forgive her in that moment. But I stopped carrying the question of why like a stone in my pocket. Some answers arrived too late to change the past, but just in time to release the future. I began hosting small dinners at the house. Nothing fancy. Just food and conversation, and the comfort of a place that no longer held secrets. Laughter sounded different here now. Freer. Once, someone asked if it felt strange living in a house where so much had happened. I thought about it. "No," I said. "It feels honest." On the anniversary of my aunt's death, I took a walk along the lake at dawn. The air was cool, the water still. I stopped at the edge and let myself grieve, not just for her, but for the version of me that had trusted without question. I whispered goodbye to both, not with bitterness, with gratitude for the clarity they'd forced upon me. That afternoon, I received a message from Daniel. The first in months. "I hope you're well," it read. "I think about you sometimes. I hope the house brings you peace." I stared at it, waiting for a familiar ache. It didn't come. I deleted the message without replying. Peace doesn't require acknowledgement. As the day faded into evening, I lit a candle on the porch and watched the sun sink behind the trees. The lake reflected everything back without judgment, clouds, light, shadow. I understood then that inheritance isn't about what you receive. It's about what you choose to keep. I kept my dignity. I kept my clarity. I kept the part of myself that didn't shrink to make room for other people's secrets. The rest I let go. Because the deepest betrayal I could have committed would have been staying silent once I knew. And I refused to inherit that. There are moments in life that divide us quietly. Not with noise or confrontation, but with understanding. Standing at the edge of that lake now, I can tell you this. The hardest part wasn't discovering the betrayal. It was accepting that the people I loved most were capable of choosing comfort over honesty and doing it again and again. For a long time, I thought inheritance was about gain. A house, land, something solid you can point to and say, "This is mine now." But what my aunt left me wasn't just a property. She left me the truth. And the truth, once it finds you, doesn't let you go back to who you were before. It asks you to decide what kind of person you're willing to be, with your eyes open. I could have sold the house. I could have walked away. I could have pretended it all belonged to someone else's life. But I stayed. I stayed because walking away would have meant letting their secrecy define the ending. And I wanted the ending to belong to me. If you're listening to this and you've uncovered something you never asked to know, something that cracked open your sense of safety, I want you to hear this. You're not weak for being shocked. You're not foolish for trusting. And you're not cruel for choosing truth over comfort. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to carry someone else's lies any longer. So let me ask you gently, honestly. If you inherited a truth that changed everything, would you keep it buried? Or would you build something honest on top of it? Tell me in the comments. I read them more than you know. And if stories like this, real, imperfect, deeply human, matter to you, please subscribe and support the channel. We're here to remind each other that even when betrayal reshapes our lives, it doesn't get to decide who we become.